What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Jiu Jitsu Junction podcast. My name is Andre, and I'm here with my buddy Chase, who is currently cosplaying as Hulk Hogan with his Hulkmania shirt.
Hulkamaniacs.
Is it Hulkmaniac? Anyway.
No, it's Hulkamania, but if you're Hulkamania, you're a Hulkamaniac.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, so the topic of today's podcast is what adult white belt jiu-jitsu guys and girls can learn from watching kids jiu-jitsu.
So much.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in the differences between what a kid's class looks like and what an adult's class looks like. And it shows up in a bunch of different ways. And in order to get some context, like a gross oversimplification of what we see in a kid's class is you walk in, you look on the mats, you see a bunch of cheerful, smiling faces doing their best at getting the gross motions right for jiu-jitsu.
They're rolling and spinning and, working on knee mobility, how to move their hips, and they're having fun doing it.
Yeah. And then we walk into an adult's class, and what do we see? It's not the same thing. We see about 50% of people who have something similar to the attitude of the kids. They're smiling, they're enjoying being there.
Yeah, it's their happy place.
Yeah, and it's their happy place. I feel like that whenever I walk onto the mats. But at the same time, you see the other half, and they've got negative emotions on their face. They could be frustrated or upset. They could be sad because they're not making the progress that they feel they should be making. And it's just not visible to them, right?
Probably the first thing they should learn from the kids' class is you can wear your emotions on your sleeve, but your emotions can change quickly. Like, don't dwell on those emotions. That's not who you are. And that's the coolest thing, I think, with the kids' classes. They can literally 1 second be so upset and the next second be happy, and it's a cool, and obviously they have to learn how to control that and regulate that and bring that to a middle, and that's kind of one of my goals as a coach. But that's the first thing they need to learn there is like, man, just take every rep for something new, take every move, everything, every day for something new. Because that's the biggest thing you see with kids, not until they're 14, 15 to do the days of past wear on them.
Yeah. Yeah, and something that comes from taking things too seriously and getting stuck in these negative emotional cycles that frequently happens with adults is that their progress kind of happens and starts and stutters. All right, we had an interruption, so I believe we were talking about how adults have more negative emotion and how that kind of stunts their progress. It kind of starts and stops, right? And kids don't really have that problem. They will make very consistent progress because they're just doing their movements. They're trying their best to get the motions correct. And sometimes adults are looking for adjustments and ways to get to the final product right away.
Adults are trained to, I love it. And, I might be, the kids that I hang around, it might backfire on me at a point, but man, adults are looking for all the steps, and they want the directions and all the details. And man, remember what it was like whenever you got to try to figure things out and you enjoyed figuring things out? You looked at the little...
That's gone. Even the way video games are. You
don't figure it out anymore.
No, you just have an arrow pointing you, and you've got all this shortcuts and complete guidance for every step of everything.
Obviously, a little aside talking about video game, but the Pokemon games, they were really good with, man, you had to look behind every bush. You had to talk to every person. If you missed a person, you might have missed something that you need 2 cities from now.
Yeah.
So that's one of the games I let Gage play, and I'm like, you got to figure this out. You can't just...
Yeah.
Go through stuff. No, you got to figure things out. You can't miss things. That's gone. So, you see that in the kids, especially in my kids' class. I got the saying I say to all the kids, and you've heard me say it. I'm like, hey, do you want me to tell you how to do everything like your parents do, or do you want me to let you try to figure it out? And they kind of, I want to figure it out.
Yeah,
exactly. Mm-hmm. And then even if they're off, I start adjusting them as long as they're trying to figure it out, because then that shows that they're trying to figure it out.
They're more engaged.
Oh, it's crazy.
Like when you have to engage the parts of your brain that go into solving a puzzle, things are going to go better for you.
Yeah, so it's so cool to watch. So that's that's something that I see is like, and obviously with our instructor Jeff, I pick with everybody all the time. I'll do personal lessons sometimes, and once someone has the foundation laid, they're like, "Man, I didn't know you knew this many details. You don't ever teach that when you teach a class." No, I'm oversimplifying. Like, I actually have people ask me more questions when I teach because of that reason, because I oversimplify everything. It's like, no, yes, I am doing that, but that's irrelevant. I need you're trying to figure out this motion. You're trying to figure out the idea of what we're doing. So that kind of...
it results in like kind of this double engagement thing that's really good. You try to figure it out yourself, engages one part of the brain, and then you have to ask a question to understand.
That's big.
That's another big, important part of learning. So
I didn't realize how hard it was for people to ask questions, like to ask a question.
Asking a good question. We have people that are like, is this right? I'm like, yes, you just showed me what I just showed you. Of course it's right. Yeah. That's not a question. A question would be like, why am I...
People that actually have the good question don't want to ask the good question.
Yeah, like why am I pulling that elbow? Yeah. Oh, it's because you're trying to break the balance that direction. Yeah. Or you're trying to loosen the grip so you can move your hips. Like those are the kinds of...
Move your hips.
Yeah, exactly. Poet and I didn't know it.
I'm telling you, on it.
Yeah, so like we're trying to create more engagement.
Yeah.
Like having that mental engagement is going to be way better for you.
Man,
like,
so much more satisfying, right? Like,
yeah, and you're going to understand things better.
Yeah.
Instead of just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you go, here, I tried this. This wasn't working. I wonder why that's not working. And then you'll learn, controlling elbows in this general situation is an amazing skill to have. So you focus on controlling elbows in a general situation.
I would say, and obviously I know that adult classes do still build, right? There's still a building in a direction, but a lot of times you see that build in a kids class in a general direction where they're always building, and it's like you see a kid 3-4 years on their own, and you're like, that's why they were doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
So those are, that's the best thing you learn from a kids class, right? Like.
Yeah, it's about engaging the right way and they have better attitudes than adults.
Yeah.
And like there are definitely some structural things that most kids classes do that make it easier for them to get into that state, right? That learning state, that flow state, whatever we want to call it, where they're engaged and they're cheerful, right? Like something that we do is we gamify things.
Yeah.
And we talk about gamifying things all the time on this podcast.
Give them very specific goals. Hey, this is what we're trying to get. You get points for this move. Mm-hmm. Can you do this move? Yeah, I guess you can, but it doesn't score. Yeah.
So, like, creating the game makes it easier to engage. And they'll ask questions. They'll try to figure out the puzzle because they want to win the game.
Yeah.
And the game is not to win. The game is to do a specific building block skill, right? And I think that's super helpful for adults to do as well.
And, I've had a few arguments like, well, I'm not getting better in any techniques, but there's so much growth that's happening. Like, you can feel how much better you get. Like, you can, when you train that way.
Yeah.
You can feel it when you gamify and you play, and not just it's fun, but like you can feel how much better it is to play. It's actually closer to the magic than people think as far as, competing at a high level too. Mm-hmm. Almost at a level, we talk about that flow state, getting a level of play, that's going to help on all stages.
Yep. Yeah. Another thing that kids have that's different is that they don't view training as exercise.
Yeah, no, they're excited to come to class all day.
Mm-hmm. They're not like, I'm going to be sore tomorrow. Nope.
That's true.
Oh, am I going to be able to train 3 times? I'm like, bro, yes. you'll be able to train 3 times.
Well, and if you don't feel like you can, that's that GPP, that general physical preparedness we've talked about.
Yeah.
Like that's then there's things like if you're having that problem, make sure reach out. We give you stuff to do. Like
do your GPP, do your mobility. I promise that unless like if you can't train 3 or 4 times a week, I mean, obviously if you don't have the time, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But if you can't recover from 3 or 4 times a week, then you probably shouldn't be doing a combat sport.
Yeah.
You'll be able to do it. You
Yeah.
build up all of your attributes enough to support your training, and it's going to be good for you and your health.
Yeah, it's going to be good for you. Even if it takes, doing that little 10 to 15 minute workout at home before you go to sleep, or before you get in the shower at night when you get off work, like it's worth doing that. It won't take 4 to 6 times most of the time. That's like the number. It's super easy to kind of reach that. Like the first 2 times are tough. The third time you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That wasn't as bad. And then 4, 5, and 6, you're like, okay, this workout wasn't as hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all we done was broke you kind of over that mental barrier,
Mm-hmm.
So you definitely got to get that in so that it's not work. It's not a hard training session you're going into. Now, obviously, if you're getting ready for competition, that's
a different thing.
That's different.
But that's kind of like a small portion of people. Most people just want to learn and kind of like play with their friends.
Be excited. You tell some people that, hey, man, I got jiu-jitsu class tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell people. We talk about 4 o'clock open rolls all week.
Yeah, I'm thinking about open mat on Friday, as early as after open mat on Friday.
It's pretty funny, right?
So like you should be excited. Like it's supposed to be fun. So another thing that kids don't do that adults are extremely bad at is having arbitrary limits set. It kind of goes in with the, I can't recover from more than 1 or 2 sessions a week. I'm like, yeah, you can. You just need to do things differently.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like setting these it feels like I'm setting hard lines.
My favorite thing is when a kid comes to me and like, yeah, coach, I think my body just needs to take a break. I'm like, that's what your mom or dad said? Because kids don't think like that.
No.
It's okay. Yeah, I think my body needs a break. My muscles are overworked. My back's sore.
Yeah.
My knees are sore.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Yep.
Your mom and dad's knees are sore. They don't think, they're tired of driving you back and forth to practice.
That is most likely what it is.
Yes, for sure.
It's inconvenient for the parent. Okay, another interruption happened, but we're going to get through this episode eventually.
One day.
So we were talking about how adults set arbitrary limits and kids don't. Some of the limits that are given are, I'm not fit enough, I'm too small, I'm not strong enough, I'm not mobile enough, right? So all of these things are rooted in a small amount of truth, but it really off tracks people because they have to really try before they adjust.
Yeah.
But they're adjusting beforehand, and having that structure of I need to always tweak and adjust everything makes things kind of tough. That doesn't matter. So kids don't do that. Like something that I find hilarious, and when I'm teaching the kids class, I make the littlest ones throw the biggest ones, especially in judo. And what's hilarious is they're like, you know what? I got this. They're just like, they pull them, they push them, and they trip them, and they're like, yeah, would a 100-pound guy ever just like commit to throwing somebody carry size? No. And but they have to try it first in order to try and do the technique, and then you adjust from there. They where as adults we train less than we can. Overtraining is pretty hard to do.
Yeah,
it's you're just under recovering. You're not taking care of your basic needs, right?
Overtraining, no, you're not overtraining. You're not doing everything else right.
Yeah, you gotta do a little bit of nutrition. It would be ideal if you nailed every aspect of it, but doing just a little bit of paying attention to nutrition and recovery will make a big difference.
Yep. Some of those things that kids recover so well for, they don't really have a lot of inflammation, a lot of lactic acid. Their nutrition and ways to eat to reduce your lactic acid, to reduce that inflammation.
They move all the time.
Yep.
They don't stop moving because they're a little bit tired. They just keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have not setting those arbitrary limits for yourself and genuinely trying to do things the right way without any sort of, I can't do that.
Yeah. No, man.
Get rid of those barriers.
Ceilings, those ceilings are crazy.
You'll get closer than you think you will.
Yep.
Right. And then tweak after that. And maybe have someone else talk to you about your tweaks that isn't you, because people tend to be like with themselves. They're like, I'm going to take it easy on myself because I'm lazy or because I just don't feel like it. Right. I have these other competing priorities. Your buddy can be like, you seem fine. Right?
Yeah.
You should be training. I'll see you at training.
Yeah.
So those preconceived notions, those arbitrary limits, they're not really serving you.
That just with the limits, it's we should look at our adult, because as an adult in jiu-jitsu, you can get just as good, just as fast as like kids can. It's the same thing, but we tend to forget that adults can grow and become good, just like there's not a point you stop. It's like, oh, you slow down growth now because you're at no. You can grow just as fast, and that's something with kids that definitely goes with that. Like those limits, like kids, everybody views kids as they can get better, they can grow, like but that's across the board. They think there's a barrier put there, like, oh man, I've gotten older, I can't learn as much, or
So like kind of another thing is that adults have different goals. Right? They have all of these outcome-based goals. Like, I must have this happen or I will be upset. I need to not struggle with this or I will be upset. I need to hit this or I will be upset. Yeah. How about you just try and don't be upset?
Yeah, good try.
Yeah, give it a shot. Like you don't need to be upset. Right? You don't need to have all of these outcome-oriented ways of thinking.
Yeah.
If you just go in with an open mind and do all of the things that you are trying to do, either from your personal plan of what you're trying to improve, and just play there, try and execute, don't be upset about it, you'll make better progress because you'll have more quality reps.
Clear. Yeah.
Just generally, kids do not have that much outcome orientation unless adults put it in their mind that they have to have outcome orientation.
Yeah, I really love it. I can grab some of the kids and their parents early, in their age, and kind of put a hold on that for a little while. Listen, we'll put importance on it at a point, but we're not going to put importance on it until the kid does. And there's a point where the kid's like, hey, I want to win more. I promise. It's happened over and over now, and what I do with my kids, and I don't put it on them until they tell me, and then I look at them like, that's what you want to do? Mm-hmm. Okay, then. I can hold you to that standard. This is what it's going to take. So that's definitely, that will come. But, the fact, kids don't have it at first. It comes from a parent.
Yeah, but it usually does.
Yeah.
So, like, there are things that adults can learn from kids. A lot of it has to do with outcome orientation. A lot of it has to do with the structures that we as adults put in place that are just barriers to execution. Yeah. I'm not strong enough. I'm not big enough. I'm not fit. I feel sore. There are things you could do about all of those things.
Yeah.
So maybe just spend some of the energy to improve those things.
Yeah.
So anyway, play games, show up and do your best. Try to stay present. Don't worry about what you're doing. Just do what you're doing. Set goals that promote fun and learning. And just try to do things as they are shown or as you have learned without thinking about limits, because the limits, find the limits. Don't assume the limits.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Find the limits.
Don't let someone else tell you your limits, please.
So, Yeah, don't do all of those things. I promise it's gonna make you feel like a kid on the mats. You're going to make all of the rapid growth that you see kids make that adults don't usually make it. Especially if they get bogged down in the negative emotion. So
my favorite thing in a kid, oh man, is whenever you get a kid who's usually a little rounder than most, a little slower than most, a little less athletic than most, but he just thinks he can do that big broad jump or that front handspring, and he just knows he can do the handstand or whatever the difficult or easy. He just knows he can do the front roll.
Yeah.
And like, oh man, it's one of my favorite things. You listen, don't do that. I'm going to show you what I want you. No, I can do it. Listen, I want you to do this, and like he's just so hell bent. Like, no, I can do it.
Yeah.
And clearly, every physical barrier, should be mental barriers, but it's not. You know, talk about up to 11 years old, where these kids will literally, I have to stop them from trying to front flip because all the other kids can do it. And it's like, listen, I understand, I love your enthusiasm, but you cannot do it.
You know what's
let's try to hold a push up.
What's the best is when you're like, there's no way they can do it, and then they freaking do it anyway, and you're just like,
not
wow.
these kids. Not this kid. Not this level of kid I'm talking about.
Okay,
yeah,
well.
it's a special one. Yeah, most of the time they can, and I encourage it.
Yeah.
But when all physical barriers are as clear
Okay,
as
I
they
know
can
who
be.
you're talking about now.
Yeah, there's a couple. No, there's been a couple over the time.
Yeah.
You know, but like just the kid's relentlessness to no, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you could just extract that out as an adult, like no, I got it.
Yeah.
It don't matter how many times he mess up, I got it. You know, so.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, we hope you found that helpful. You know, learn from the kids. You know, it's not a one-way street. You know, we're not only teaching kids how to be. If we learn from how the kids are, we can access some of that joy and accelerated learning.
Believe it.
So give that a try, and leave comments below. Share your experiences. You know,
Yep.
love to hear from you, and we will see you next time.